Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has said the war in Iran could end soon, even as Washington is reportedly preparing for several weeks of limited ground operations. Meanwhile, Iran warned that any U.S. ground invasion will be met with severe retaliation. North Korea announced over the weekend that it tested an upgraded solid fuel engine for its intercontinental ballistic missiles. Leader Kim Jong-un oversaw the test, part of Pyongyang's 5-year defense plan aimed at advancing its strategic strike capabilities. K-pop supergroup BTS has scored its 7th #1 debut on the US Billboard 200 with its latest album, Arirang. This comes after the album also topped the UK's official albums chart top 100. We begin this morning with the latest on the conflict in the Middle East. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says the war in Iran could end soon, even as Washington ramps up troop deployments and weighs limited ground operations. The mixed signals come as tensions rise in the Strait of Hormuz and diplomatic efforts intensify to prevent a wider regional conflict. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says the war in Iran is expected to be a short-term effort, with American forces likely to withdraw soon. Speaking on the Benny Show podcast on Friday, Vance said the U.S. has achieved what he called the gross majority of its military objectives following joint U.S.-Israeli strikes that began on February 28th.
I think you can make a good argument we've accomplished all of our military objectives. The president's going to keep at it for a little while longer to ensure that once we leave, we don't have to do this again for a very, very long time.
He also addressed the economic impact of the conflict, acknowledging that tensions across the Middle East have driven up global energy prices. Vance said he expects gas prices to fall once U.S. involvement winds down. Despite that outlook, military planning suggests the situation remains active. According to the Washington Post on Saturday, the Pentagon is preparing for several weeks of limited ground operations. These could include targeted raids on Karg Island, a major Iranian oil export hub, and coastal areas near the Strait of Hormuz. Officials say the plan stops short of a full-scale invasion, but could involve special operations forces and conventional troops, exposing U.S. personnel to drones, missiles, and ground fire. The White House stressed that no final decision has been made. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the Pentagon is preparing options to give the president maximum flexibility. Iran has issued strong warnings in response. Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf said Sunday that any U.S. ground invasion would be met with severe retaliation. At the same time, diplomatic efforts are underway. Regional officials meeting in Pakistan are seeking to open direct talks with Washington and Tehran in an effort to put an end to the conflict. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
So it's been a month since the U.S. and Israel launched strikes on Iran, and there's still no end to the conflict in sight. For more on this, we're joined today by Professor Robert Lawrence, Professor of English and Turkic Studies at Dongguk Women's University. Professor Lawrence, thanks for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So the Pentagon is reportedly preparing for weeks of ground operations in Iran. Is the Trump administration choosing to escalate this war? What do you make of the latest developments?
Right, where there's one Marine Expeditionary Unit on the way, and there's one that's already in the region, apparently. That's about 5,000 Marines. There's also the first Brigade Combat Team, which is a rapid deployment force from the 82nd Airborne that's either in the region or on its way right now. In addition, there's the George H.W. Bush Carrier Strike Group is underway on the way to the region. That's going a little underreported, but that should replace ostensibly the Gerald Ford, which is in Crete right now. When we hear things about the Pentagon preparing for weeks, those types of contingency plans don't necessarily mean that that's what's going to happen. They plan for all types of contingency plans, and then they give those to the president, and the president eventually makes a decision. So nothing's inevitable with all of that. If we look historically speaking, under this administration, when they've put assets into a theater, they have used those assets. But this could very well just be posturing for negotiations, right? Kind of maximizing, your threat escalation maybe for negotiations. As far as actually doing this, putting boots on the ground in one of the islands or some of the coastal areas along the Strait of Hormuz, this is extremely risky. Troops will be pretty vulnerable, I think, to drones and possibly missile attacks while they're there. And this may not sit very well back in the U.S. There's some polling data that's come out recently that would probably encourage the president to be cautious about some of this, but we really don't know. The final decision lies with Donald Trump. So, he may be trying to posture himself for negotiations, but certainly, as we've seen before, if he's pushed, then he hasn't really shied away from using whatever he thinks he needs to use. So, time will tell, I guess.
Right. We'll have to wait and see. And President Trump has again extended his self-imposed deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz until next month, that's April 6th. But Iran continues to say it's not negotiating with the White House. Are the two sides far from reaching a deal?
Well, Iran keeps saying that, but we know that there are third-party interlocutors that are kind of passing messages back and forth. So, it's one thing I would say is that it's difficult to underestimate the level of distrust between these two sides. From the Iranian perspective, twice in 8 months, they've been in negotiations and the U.S. has ended up attacking them. And from the U.S. perspective, basically, there's been decades of dishonesty and deceit. So, it's tough to say how big of a problem this is in any negotiation. Both sides are claiming that they're winning right now, and they're sticking to this maximalist rhetoric. Iran wants recognition of its sovereignty over the strait, and the U.S. basically wants capitulation. So, I don't really see how either side finds the other's demands to be acceptable. With the attacks on Iran increasing over the weekend, U.S. personnel and material increasing in the region, and the Houthis entering the conflict now. And just about 2 hours ago, it was reported that Iran hit a desalination plant in Kuwait. So, when we see all of this combining, there's nothing that really indicates that there's an off-ramp, which would indicate that both sides are trying to actually end this. However, this could very well be a negotiating tactic, and it's nothing new about that. Showing force while heading into negotiations is just trying to give yourself a better position at the table. So that might be what it is as well. Eventually, I guess we're going to have to see if either side really wants to end the conflict, or if they're so determined to make the other bend to the other's will that they're just not going to stop.
Right, and Pakistan said it's ready to host the talks between the United States and Iran after diplomats from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey met in Islamabad. How might that help bring an end to this conflict?
Regional foreign ministers have been busy. They had this meeting yesterday in Islamabad, and they say it was very productive. Pakistan is saying that both the U.S. and Iran have shown confidence in them as a mediator, and they're passing messages through Pakistan to each other. And they said they're also prepared to host bilateral talks in the coming days. If these diplomats can come up with a creative off-ramp that's somehow suitable for both sides, then there's a possibility. But right now, it just seems like they're trying to lay the groundwork for talks to actually happen, a step-by-step process. And I think that that's probably as ambitious as they need to get right now. Just getting the two to talk will be a bit of a victory, and we can move forward from there. Eventually it's going to take those two sides to show the will to negotiate. But, like I said before, right now, it really seems like each of them are bent on making the other capitulate. So, we'll see how effective these foreign ministers can be on getting the two sides to the table, but there may take more external pressure. And in the U.S. case, it may take domestic pressure for something like that to happen.
Right. And you mentioned Houthis joining the war, and they've actually claimed responsibility for missile attacks on Israel for the first time since this war began last month. How far is the war expanding?
Right. Well, the Houthis' entrance into the war is not unexpected. Everybody's been waiting to see when they're going to do what, basically. Now, it is extremely dangerous, though, because of the flow of oil more than anything. So the Houthis are on one side of the Bab al-Mandab, which is the strait between Yemen and Djibouti, which is the entrance into the Red Sea. Now, the reason this is important is because In order to bypass the problem with the Strait of Hormuz, the Saudis have enacted the East-West pipeline. They've increased their output going through the East-West pipeline, which goes from the Persian Gulf and Abqaiq over to Yanbu, the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea. Now, as of yesterday, they've brought this to full capacity. They're putting 7 million barrels per day through the pipeline, 2 million for domestic purposes and 5 for the global energy markets. Now, from Yanbu, it can go a couple of different directions. It can get on tankers to go to Egypt and then out through the Sumed, which puts oil into the Mediterranean and onward to Europe. But a lot of it right now is going out the southern route through the Bab el-Mandeb. And this is going to Asian markets. Now, the Houthis, because this strait is only about 29 kilometers across, this is a very narrow strait that can be shut down fairly easily. And the Houthis have a number of options they can use to make this situation much worse. For example, they could fire on the Yanbu port, or they could hit ships in the Red Sea. They could close down the strait, the actual Bab el-Mandeb, or they could hit the East-West pipeline like they did in 2019. They hit Afif in Saudi Arabia. So any of these options would really make a massive problem. You would disrupt supply security in global energy markets. And, as of right now, I think 10 minutes ago, Brent crude was selling at 115 a barrel. About 2 months ago, it was selling at 60. So it's almost already at double. If you knock out 5 million barrels per day off the market, then that could be a real significant blow to global energy markets and the global economy at large. So I think that's the biggest threat coming out from the Houthis. So we'll see how they want to engage in this war.
Right, we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Lawrence, thanks so much for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. As the conflict in the Middle East continues, Prime Minister Kim Min-seok says preventing disruptions to the supply of everyday essentials will be one of the government's top priorities. Speaking at the first emergency economic headquarters meeting on Sunday, Kim instructed relevant ministries to closely monitor supply conditions and come up with response measures. Concerns are rising over possible supply shortages of goods made from naphtha, such as plastic bags, as the closure of the Strait of Hormuz continues to hamper energy and raw material flows. To secure domestic supply, the government has already imposed a 5-month ban on naphtha exports. Over the weekend, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un inspected a new, more powerful missile engine for ICBMs, hinting at the regime developing multiple warhead capabilities. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has overseen a ground test of a high-thrust solid-fuel engine made with carbon fiber composite materials. The exact date of the test has not been unveiled, but according to the Korean Central News Agency on Sunday, the newly upgraded engine has a maximum thrust of 2,500 kilonewtons. The test was part of a 5-year National Defense Development Plan aimed at advancing strategic strike means, and Kim was quoted as saying that the regime's defense capabilities had entered a significant phase of change in building strategic forces. Pyongyang previously conducted a final ground jet test of a carbon fiber solid fuel engine in September last year, where the maximum thrust was known to be 1,971 kilonewtons. The latest test showed an increase of around 26%, enough to lift an object weighing about 255 tons into the air. An increase in an engine's maximum thrust usually means a longer range for intercontinental ballistic missiles. However, as North Korea is already believed to possess ICBMs capable of reaching the U.S. mainland, many experts say the regime's efforts to continuously boost engine output may be to develop multiple warhead ICBMs, which are more difficult to intercept. The new engine is likely to be mounted on the Hwasong-20, which North Korea has said it is developing. Experts say this could be a message to the U.S., showing that North Korea is different from Iran and can strike the U.S. mainland. Kim also inspected a test to assess the performance of new main battle tanks at a facility of the Academy of Defense Sciences and reviewed training exercises of Special Operations Forces under the Operations Bureau of the General Staff of the Korean People's Army. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
On the cultural front, BTS has secured the band's 7th #1 debut on the U.S. Billboard 200 with its latest album, Arirang. According to Billboard on Sunday, their first full group release in 3 years and 9 months debuted at the top of the charts for the week of April 4th. The Billboard 200 ranks the most popular albums in the U.S. based on combined metrics, including physical sales, streaming, and track equivalent units. The milestone further extends BTS' record with 7 #1 debuts. Arirang also topped the UK's official albums chart top 100, while its lead single, Swim, debuted at #2 on the official singles chart top 100. As BTS' latest album, Arirang, continues its global momentum, our culture correspondent Park Gun-woo spoke with one of its songwriters to hear his thoughts on the massive global response and more.
Behind BTS's long-awaited return lies a year-long global collaboration project. The members spent the past year refining the project, including holding a song camp in LA for months, enabling collaborations with global songwriters. That's all much of the album's credits go to overseas producers, featuring renowned names such as multiple Grammy-winning producer Diplo, alongside emerging talents like James Essien. So, how do you feel about this massive global response going on right now for your latest tracks? And did you expect this to happen?
This is actually crazy. I've never done anything like this. I've made loads of songs, but I've never been a part of anything that's this kind of it's like a phenomenon. So
Essien, who contributed 3 songs to the 14-track album, including lead single Swim, says it was a challenge to finalize the song.
It's how do we do something that everybody that's come up with them from the beginning of their journey is going to still relate to? I was aiming to try and get Swim, but I made so many different versions of that same type of idea. I wanted to do something as a writer that was would catch people slightly off guard,
Essien says he didn't expect Swim to become the lead single, but the process showed him how K-pop continues to push boundaries.
A lot of mainstream pop music, there's more lyrical restrictions, there's more musical restrictions. K-pop is quite free, and the songs, they have scene changes, they have melodic changes, and fascinating to me as a songwriter, as somebody who came up making a lot of music that's quite, form and function. So
One culture critic says this kind of collaboration remains essential.
Collaboration and localization are important, like the case of Rosé's work with Bruno Mars and groups like Cat's Eye. At the same time, incorporating uniquely Korean elements such as the traditional folk song Arirang or the sound of the sacred bell of great King Songdok remains key to preserving its identity.
The critic added that this balance between global appeal and local identity will be key to sustaining K-pop's momentum. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
The cherry blossom season is underway across South Korea, starting in the southern part of the country, drawing crowds eager to catch the first signs of spring. Our Cho Young-eun was at a cherry blossom festival in Jinhae and files his report.
Spring has officially arrived as streets lined with cherry blossoms welcome visitors to Jinhae-gu district in the southern coastal city of Changwon. Although it's just the first day, crowds have been arriving since early afternoon, filling the streets and gathering beneath rows of cherry blossoms as they begin to bloom. Many people stop to take photos and soak in the soft pink scenery that signals the arrival of spring. Running through April 5th, the Jinhae Gunhangje Festival marks the full arrival of spring nationwide, with cherry blossoms expected to reach peak bloom throughout the week.
Now that the weather has warmed up, the flowers seem to be in fuller bloom. I came last year too, but it feels like there are more cherry blossoms this time, and more people as well.
Some visitors have even traveled all the way to Korea specifically to experience this festival, eager to take in the cherry blossoms at their peak.
I have lovely Korean students, so they told me to come to Korea. And when I got here, one of my coworkers told me about this festival.
Now in its 64th year, this festival features a wide range of events, with the city anticipating about 3.5 million visitors. The festival has prepared various booths for people to stay longer and really get the most out of the experience. The space also features a seated food zone, allowing people to enjoy the local street food while surrounded by the cherry blossoms.
Well, we just wanted to come and see the event, and we heard it's very popular. Definitely the food, the donuts. We had some Korean roasted pork. It was so delicious with the onions and peppers, with the kimchi.
From daytime strolls to nighttime attractions and performances, the festival offers a full experience for visitors of all ages. Among the highlights is the Victory Parade, along with the Military Band and Honor Guard Festival, which reflects the city's naval heritage and adds a ceremonial flair to the celebration. Moreover, the Cherry Blossom Music Festival, now in its second year, would run from April 3rd to 5th, adding to the festive atmosphere. 조영은, Arirang News, Jinhae.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Millions of Americans took to the streets on Saturday in so-called No Kings rallies. More than 3,200 anti-Trump demonstrations were held, with protests in all 50 states. The protesters criticized Trump's deportation crackdowns, the war with Iran, and what they called a dangerous drift toward authoritarianism. In New York, tens of thousands packed more than 10 city blocks in Midtown Manhattan. In Dallas, clashes with counter-protesters led to arrests. In Los Angeles, federal authorities deployed tear gas after crowds surrounded a federal building. A poll by Reuters and Ipsos suggests Trump's approval rating has fallen to 36%, the lowest since Trump's return to the White House. A Manhattan federal court on Friday accepted Bank of America's agreement to pay $72.5 million to women who accused the bank of enabling Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse. Plaintiffs allege the bank ignored suspicious transactions tied to Epstein, choosing profit over victim protection. Bank of America denied wrongdoing but called the settlement the right path forward. Other banks made similar payments in 2023, with JP Morgan settling for $290 million and Deutsche Bank for $75 million. A hearing to consider final approval is scheduled for Thursday. Nepali police on Saturday arrested former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli over deaths that occurred in last September's protests. The police are investigating whether Nepal's former leader was negligent in failing to prevent the deaths of 76 people during the Gen Z-led anti-corruption protests that forced his resignation. Former Home Minister Ramesh Lekhak was also arrested on the same grounds. Oli supporters immediately took to the streets, clashing with police who used tear gas and batons to break up the crowds. The arrest came one day after rapper-turned-politician Balendra Shah was sworn in as Nepal's new prime minister following a landslide election victory. Thieves last week stole more than 400,000 KitKat chocolate bars after hijacking the truck transporting them from central Italy to Poland. Swiss food giant Nestle confirmed Saturday the vehicle and the 12 tons of chocolate bars remain unaccounted for. Nestle said, "We appreciate the criminals' exceptional taste, but each bar carries a traceable batch code, and anyone scanning a stolen bar will receive instructions to contact the company directly."
서울 Billboard officially saw its first cherry blossoms bloom yesterday, about 10 days earlier than average, thanks to the recent stretch of mild weather. Now, rain is on the way nationwide through today and tomorrow. Rain that began in the Jeollado province and Jeju this morning will reach Seoul and the central regions by tonight. Jeju Island could see 30 to 80 millimeters of rainfall, but the capital region will see 5 to 10 millimeters of lighter showers. But until that rain arrives, the central regions will be under a dry weather advisory with more dusty air for the west of central regions. But even with the rain, temperatures remain mild. Seoul and Daegu will be getting up to 20 degrees Celsius, Gwangju topping out at 19 degrees. Most of the rain will ease by tomorrow morning, though showers may linger along the east coast into the afternoon. But after the rain moves out, warm and above average temperatures are expected to continue.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.